You know, when we think about the men who signed the Declaration of Independence, we often think they risked their fortunes, their reputations. But one of them, a man from New Jersey named Abraham Clark, was faced with a choice that was so much more personal and honestly way more terrifying. To really get the true cost of freedom, we have to hear his story.
Imagine waking up to that every single morning. That was the call that echoed from the hatches of the HMS Jersey, a British prison ship just floating there in the bay off Brooklyn. This thing was a floating tomb, just a place of complete unimaginable horror during the Revolutionary War.
I mean, just try to picture it. A retired warship, right? And it's crammed with more than twice the number of people it was ever meant to hold. They sealed the portholes shut, so the air below deck was so disgusting, so completely starved of oxygen that you couldn't even keep a candle lit. Every day, 6, sometimes 11, bodies were just hauled up and buried in shallow graves on the shore. This wasn't a prison, it was a weapon.
And on this very ship were two of Abraham Clark's own sons, Aaron and Thomas. They were both soldiers in the Continental Army. Now, the British knew exactly who they had, so they sent a message to their father, who was a delegate to the Continental Congress. And the deal was brutally simple. Publicly take back your signature on the Declaration, swear you're loyal to the king, and your boys, they get to walk free.
And Abraham Clark's answer? He refused. He chose the cause of independence over the lives of his own children.
That is a decision that's, well, it's almost impossible to wrap your head around, isn't it? So what kind of person would make a choice like that? To get it, we really have to understand the man himself.
To find that answer, we've got to look at the life and the principles that brought Abraham Clark to that moment, because he really wasn't like the other, more famous founders we always hear about. So here's the thing about Clark. His background was totally different from many of his peers. He was a farmer's son, but he was apparently too frail for that kind of hard labor. So what did he do? He taught himself. First surveying, then law, just by reading books he'd borrowed. He was a plain dude. He didn't wear a wig or those fancy ruffled shirts. One historian even called him the signer who was closest to being a typical citizen, and another said he was, quote, an enemy to every form of privilege.
He really earned his reputation just by helping out his neighbors. Most of them were farmers who had no idea how to navigate the complicated, expensive legal system. So Clark helped them out with things like land disputes, all for free. And pretty soon, they started calling him the poor man's counselor. For him, this wasn't just a job, it became who he was.
And all this work, helping regular folks, it shaped this deeply, and I mean deeply, radical political philosophy. He saw government not as a tool for the powerful, but as a shield for the weak.
This quote right here, it gets right to the heart of what he believed. He straight up told his fellow lawmakers that this was their most basic duty. For Abraham Clark, the entire point of having a government was to protect regular people from those with all the money and power.
And he went even further. He argued that a republic just couldn't survive if you had these massive gaps between the rich and poor. He actually believed the government had to play an active role in preventing extreme economic inequality. I mean, for that time period, that was a truly radical idea. And this wasn't just talk. He put these ideas right into action. Back in the 1780s, New Jersey was getting squeezed. Its citizens were paying tariffs to big neighbors like New York for imported goods, and then on top of that, Congress was demanding even more money through direct taxes. Clark saw this as a classic case of the mighty oppressing the feeble. So what did he do? He led New Jersey in an act of defiance. They refused to pay Congress a dime until the system was made fair for everybody.
So, the war ends, but Clark? Oh, he wasn't done. He took his fight for the common person straight into the new government, and he left behind a legacy of reform that, believe it or not, still affects us today.
His whole mission, really, was making justice accessible to everyone. He pushed this reform through the New Jersey legislature. It was actually known as Clark's Law, and it simplified court cases and cut down the fees. His goal, and these are his own powerful words, was to tear off the ruffles from the lawyers' wrists. Basically, to strip the legal system of all its fancy aristocratic nonsense and make it actually work for regular people. And if you look at his whole career, you see this same conviction, over and over. He was there at the Annapolis Convention pushing for a better system. At first, he was against the Constitution because it didn't have a Bill of Rights to protect individuals from the government. And once he got to Congress, he fought against anything that even hinted at monarchy, like the idea of putting the president's face on coins.
In that one fight, it had a huge, lasting result. Thanks to the arguments that Clark and others made, the Coinage Act of 1792 required that an image of liberty and the word liberty itself had to appear on U.S. coins.
So go ahead, pick up a quarter from your pocket. That word is on there because of people like him.
Okay, so now that we have a better sense of the man he was and these unwavering principles he held, let's go back to that prison ship and that impossible choice he had to make.
So after Clark refused the British offer, things for his son Thomas reportedly got even worse. Now, other members of Congress did eventually step in, but the damage was done. Both sons did survive the Jersey, but Thomas, he never recovered. All those years of starvation just shattered his health. He came home a broken man, and he died in 1789. He was only 36 years old.
And this right here, this is the key difference. The Declaration of Independence ends with the signers pledging their lives, fortunes, and sacred honor. For most of them, that was a risk to their money and their status. For Abraham Clark, the price was demanded in the actual flesh and blood of his own kids.
We have this tendency to think of the founders as these larger-than-life figures, like they're marble statues. But Clark wasn't like that. He was a plain man, completely grounded in the reality of his neighbors' lives, and he was driven by this fierce, intense desire for a system that was fair to everybody, not just the rich and powerful.
So why did he say no? Because for him, that declaration wasn't just some political document. It was a promise. It was the ultimate expression of his entire life's work to help the feeble against the mighty. To take back his name would be to betray that promise. He truly believed that the principle of liberty for all was worth a price that is, for most of us, just completely unthinkable.
His story is not a comfortable one. It doesn't have some simple, happy ending. It really forces us to look past the myths and see the brutal human sacrifice that was behind these ideals. And it leaves us with a really difficult question. What does a story like Abraham Clark's really teach us about the true, unimaginable cost of building a nation?